Good morning. I want to welcome all of you to this Democratic National Convention Forum, Dismantle, Change, Build, Embodying the Spiritual Imperative of Our Times. And let's just say that we are continuing the spirit of the conversation and mashup of humanity that began on Monday night at the DNC. I'm Catherine Henderson, the president of Auburn Seminary in New York City. Auburn works with leaders of faith and moral courage nationally to support the building of a multiracial democracy. Check us out at auburnseminary.org. Our panelists today bridge the gap between the prophetic word and activism, the doing of justice. And they have a word to say to all of us and to the Democratic National Convention, to our Auburn Senior Fellows. The Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams is the world's second Zen Buddhist teacher of African descent. She's the author of Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. And she is also founder of Transformative Change that works worldwide. Welcome, Angel. Reverend Angel.
Thank you.
The Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III is the senior minister of the Trinity United Church of Christ on the south side of Chicago. He preaches a message of the inseparability of love and justice and works on problems of mass incarceration, environmental justice, and economic inequality. Welcome, Otis.
Thank you.
And our beloved colleague and friend Rinku Sen is a writer, organizer, and political strategist. Formerly the executive director of Race Forward, she has led some of the most successful campaigns around racial justice. She is a leader on the new board of the Women's March, and her books, Stir It Up and The Accidental American, offer a powerful model of organizing that integrates race, gender, class, poverty, sexuality, and other systems. Welcome, Rinku.
Thank you, Catherine.
And welcome to all of you listening. So here we go. So Angel, I'm going to start with you. We count on you. We have come to know you, and we count on you for truth telling. Recently, when I asked you what you would say to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris if they were sitting right here with us today, and you said unceremoniously, don't blow it. So say more about what you mean, and not just for their benefit, not just for Joe and Kamala not to blow it, but for all of us.
Yeah, I think that what I mean by that is we really have at times not done justice to recognizing the multiplicity that the larger, I would say, Democratic Party represents, even when people aren't necessarily fully registered to that party. And so to not blow it is to really take that into account, to really take into account the many voices that are necessary, that is truly a coalition and a collaboration that's necessary amongst peoples for us to actually be able to reclaim this country, not just from this particular current administration, but actually to reclaim this country for and on behalf of people that in many ways the country has never actually really worked for. That many of us that are here, many of us that have made our way actually against the stream of many laws and many structures and systems that have been actually designed to keep us from being able to thrive. So really our thriving is a result of genius. And I would say for us as well, that simultaneously we have to realize that there are critical elements, critical components that exist in the structures of the opportunity to vote and so on, that so many of our ancestors participated in. So for us to not blow it is to not make a big thing of of small things, to not get things in priority and recognize our presence, our voice, and our vote is absolutely essential in these times. And then we can go and hash it out, after we're on the other side of the election. But let's get on that other side of the election in the right place.
Great. Thank you. Otis, in your film, Letter to My Son, you say to us, America does not yet have the eyes to see what we witness and what God has ordained. So how do we get to the America that we can't see so clearly right now? How can engagement in the gritty, messy world of politics set us in the right direction? Help us to win?
Well, I believe that America has a false story, false narrative, and until America can face that false narrative and that story is transformative. And the story that we have been using sees one group as an antagonist and another group as a protagonist. We separate heroes and villains. And so there is a reshaping of this story in this nation that has to happen, that includes other people, but at the same time faces the tragedy of America, but doesn't fall into despair about facing the tragedy. In other words, we've got to embrace the blues if everybody wants to ever see the good news of what happens in this nation.
Great. Well, say a little bit more about embracing the blues.
Well, America's built on the blues. It starts out in the blues. I mean, if you talk about 1690, that's a blues narrative, but America wants to frame it as a triumphant exceptionalism until we come to the fact that we are existing on stolen sacred soil, that our entire economy, as the book The Half Has Never Been Told speaks of, is built off of the backs of Black and brown people. Until we face those blues, there can be no conversation about a city upon a hill. There can be no conversation about a new morning in America until America is willing to face the tragedy, or as August Wilson says it, until we are willing to witness the city of the bones on the Atlantic and that rests in the soil of the red clay of Georgia and South Carolina, Alabama. America can never be an America until it faces the bruises, the brokenness, and the blood at which the strange fruit that it always is eating from.
Thank you. And Rinku, as someone who is known publicly for your work as a brilliant organizer, how can the visionary messages of people of faith move us in the right direction to win, not just in 2020, but beyond, and also in the sort of deeper sense of winning for the people?
Thank you for asking that question, Catherine. The crux of organizing, the core of it is a relationship. The relationships between two or more people gathered that can hold a relationship that can hold the hard work of making collective change, of figuring out together what the change needs to be, figuring out the right path to that change, the most fruitful, constructive, least destructive path to that change. And what I take from people of faith and my own faith in humanity is that we have to really work to be in that right relationship with each other for the organizing to work. I often think about the quote of Grace Lee Boggs, one of her quotes where she wrote that you have to love the people, but you also have to love their questions. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. She was more eloquent about it, but you have to love the questions as you love the people, because no one has ever tried to make justice, and full multiracial pluralistic democracy under these conditions with this kind of capitalism at this particular moment in history in this country. No one has actually succeeded in that yet. And when we try, we're going to find contradictions. They're always there. So she urges us to work through those contradictions, not to avoid them, not to suppress them, And if we're in right relationship, contradictions and questions should always be okay. And the relationship that we're in is going to ground us in grappling with those and working through them.
What say a little bit more, and I'm wondering, Otis, maybe you and Angel want to jump in here about this term, right relationship. Does that, what does that evoke for you? It's a term that we use a lot now, but yeah, Rinku, if you want to say more, but Otis and Angel jump in too.
I learned about the concept of right relationship through Buddhism, and it just struck me immediately as the core of everything. I think right relationship with yourself, right relationship with the earth, and right relationship with other beings, including human beings. So struggling toward right relationship feels to me like all of life, like what I was put here to do. And I'm super grateful to the Buddhist tradition for bringing that to my consciousness.
Yeah, I would add, I learned that idea from my mother, who shared this idea that can you learn and accept the beautiful brokenness of someone and pull from that the beauty, argue with the brokenness, put some balm on the brokenness, and still be in tension and in relationship. No one is going to be perfect. And so she would use it. That's how grace works, is that you see the operation of someone through their brokenness, that you can see the fullness of them, versus looking for all that they should be instead of accepting for what they are and engaging them at that level. In other words, she says, always, can you accept them for what they are, pull for what is beautiful, and then still deal with the jagged edges at the same time? You may get cut, but you still can be in relationship with them.
Yeah, and I would say, my book and the stream of work that I'm most deeply engaged in right now is called Radical Dharma, and Radical Dharma is actually exactly right relationship. Radical means whole, and Dharma is like truth, and so it's like to be in whole truth. And as Rinku said, that means to be in whole truth with yourself and to be in whole truth with others. And that's an integrity and an honesty about like all the parts, the brokenness. Like, can you see people through the brokenness and allow them to be who they are? So I often say that, relationship is love and love is space. So that means letting people be the space to be who they are, but also to let them have the space in order to evolve, in order to become something different, to allow our relationships, going back to the previous question, to allow the relationship of America to be honest with itself and where we actually are and what we have never been. So I often talk about the idea of a new America, because I think one of the things that happens for us is that we do claim this relationship and we cling to the relationship to an America that never was. And because we cling to that relationship, we're not in truth, right? We're not in right relationship as a collective. We are not in right relationship with America, because we're not allowing for the brokenness. We're not allowing for the blues of our reality. And I think in many ways, just like when you have relationships, there's something about turning around and facing relationships anew so that you can let go of some of the old energy that you're holding on in that relationship. So that's why I talk a lot about a new America. So maybe it will give us permission to dream into the possibility of what we've always wanted it to be, but it has never been. And I think that that's right relationship.
Great. So let's turn to some specifics, because we're clearly not in right relationship at this moment. In fact, we're at a crisis moment, because we are seeing democracy unraveling right before our eyes, and the attack on the post office by Trump is just yet another case in point embedded in this larger issue of election tampering. So people's lives are at stake, people are dying. So as prophets and spiritual activists, what's the concrete work that we need to do to build a multiracial democracy where we can actually see each other? What's the work we have to do? And just jump in. Invitation.
I can jump in really quickly. I have some noise happening outside, so let me know if that is distracting.
It's okay, Rinku.
Okay, thank you.
We've all got lots of stuff.
Right.
Places. So if a dog barks, if there's noise outside, just keep going. This is our work. Yeah.
Great. I think a lot of the work that we have to do is to actually reimagine or imagine for the first time how our big systems can actually work better for so many more people. How are we as a country going to keep people housed and fed and cared for health-wise? And I think that we often put that work on somebody else. We put it on Congress, or we put it on policy wonks, or we put it on administrators of large agencies. But really, the way that government works is a reflection of all of our values and of us as a community. So we should all have something to say about how we live together and how we work together, and the structures that are set up to make sure that we do that with the greatest results possible. And so I love ideas like participatory budgeting in cities. I'd encourage everyone to either push for your city or state to open up its budgets for public comment and public workshopping, if it doesn't do that already. And if it does do that already, I would encourage you to get involved in that. A city budget, which makes many people's eyes glaze over, it is the actual expression of the values of that city, just as it would be in your household or in your organization or business. So getting involved in the nitty-gritty of how our systems actually work, where we're putting our money, where we're raising our money, and how we are accountable to each other as a society through the things that we have to do together. The trash has to get picked up, and the environment has to be saved, and people need healthcare. So there are tons of really concrete opportunities. Budgeting is one that I love.
That's a beautiful, beautiful idea when you're talking about budgets as moral documents. They are. The budgets are moral documents. And imagination, merging those two pieces together. I believe that one of the greatest tragedies of colonization, systematic racism, white supremacy is the destruction of the human imagination. And keeping young people from imagining what has not happened, but acting as if it already has, becomes a really critical piece. I use an example. We do a freedom school as an example in the summer with our young people. And every year they have to find a particular issue they can change in their city. That's how we end out our freedom school. And so one year they had to get lights on, literally. They had to get street lights on. How do you go through the process of getting street lights on? When they found out they could get the street lights on, something happened. They said, you know what? We can fix the street, change the block, and all of a sudden imagination came into the frame. When they started out in the program, they were saying what can't be done. Once we gave them permission to imagine, they all of a sudden had these radical ideas that started, coming out of their spirit left and right. And so I believe that in terms of what we must do today is that we've got to teach people to reimagine. We've got to make sure that the colonization of the consciousness does not win out, so that people can see a future that has not yet existed, but only exists in our heart and in our spirit that we work toward. And I just love that, just love that piece that you bring up in reference to moral documents. And moral documents begin our imagination of what hasn't happened, but will happen.
And I think very related to that is to recognize that we have more than just a political crisis. We have a spiritual crisis, and we have a spiritual crisis as a nation. But part of that is because we have a spiritual crisis as peoples, as individuals. And sometimes we get really focused on, a few little sound bites of like this particular issue or that particular issue. But so going back to what Rinku was saying and that Dr. Moss is adding to, I feel like mapping and taking a real inventory of your own values and recognizing, rather than getting caught up in like this one issue that's being, hanging out and people are like talking about that one issue, is really being honest and integral about the ways in which many of us that may be thinking the system is working for us, that the truth is it's actually not working for us. Because I think that that's one of our big significant divides, is that we have this sort of very broad stroke idea of like there's people of color, BIPOC, marginalized people on the one side, and there are, maybe liberal people, progressive people, but largely, white-bodied people on the other side, and the system is just like not working for the brown and black and colored folks and is working, and it's just not true. And it really disrupts our ability to be in alignment with our values at a very deep level. So I think the moral document, right, the spiritual document, the document that is about what is it that lifts life up for us. And if we step away from the crowd and the noise, what actually mapping in any given issue, like what is really true for me, and is that aligning with my values, or am I just getting caught up with, the kind of, divided noise that we get into and then forget what is really true for us.
How do you help people see that the system isn't working for them? I mean, some people know it, but I mean, you're positing here that some people for whom the system is not working just aren't willing to see that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very long history of really the fact and the structure of racialization has created this split in which so many people that are poor and white-bodied are actually voting against their own interest because race has so taken a primacy of like, there are some people that are going to take over what is ours, or, this, even the idea of this kind of scarcity model that if all there is either you win or I win. And in fact, many of these structures are not actually working for many people that are middle class, working class white folks, and the structures are not working for them. Healthcare is not working for them. They're going to have the same bills. Not having a social safety net when we have the global pandemic is not working for them. So being able to reach back and recognize that these systems, right, to really see where your skin is. I talk about, so you have skin in the game. Skin in the game on that level, on a political level, on the level of budgets and actually how cities work, but also skin in the game on a personal, spiritual, like, can I just be at comfort and ease in conversation so that I can be in relationship with these people, with people that otherwise seem other, or that I've been told are other or distant or different than me? That's actually that is a moral crisis and a spiritual crisis, that we can't be in relationship with people on the basis of their religion or the basis of their skin color, and we're not able to move beyond that and through that to take the time to actually get to know and understand people that are in different spaces, inhabit different bodies, appear to have different values, and so on. My experience is that when we really show up in our whole selves, we actually recognize that so many of us, there will be conflicts, right? There will be contradictions. But actually so many of us, when we're connected to our whole truth, have a lot more in common in terms of our aspirations, and then we have to work out the gnarly pieces of it.
And yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
The gnarly pieces, yes. You brought up the the spiritual word, and actually the word soul of the nation, that's been bandied about a lot at the Democratic National Convention. We've heard a lot of soul talk. And we've seen, religion hijacked by conservative forces over the last decades. And that kind of religion does not define or speak for us. So from your particular traditions, I mean, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, what do your particular traditions say about the spiritual imperative of this moment? What's the lens through which you see this?
Well, I see it through the lens of a form of idolatry in terms of the Black church tradition seeing whiteness as idolatry, that is the ultimate form of worship that has created a narrative in America. And now the spiritual crisis is the fact that people are realizing my whiteness is not enough. It still does not give me all that I desire. It gives me privilege, but it makes my soul anemic at the same time. And we're witnessing that at a high level in this nation. And so my tradition that come out of a Black church tradition. So when I say Black church, it's not Christianity in blackface. It's a particular tradition that has a theological framework that brings together a variety of traditions that says community becomes of an utmost importance. Second is that the Spirit moves through every aspect of our being, meaning that whether you're washing clothes or whether you are in church, those are all spiritual activities that function in order to develop the full human personality. And we have to engage the fact that fundamentalism, the idea of certainty, and the creation of this whiteness narrative, and then adding to that holy war. And I use holy war in the aspect of the fact that America sees itself as an exceptionalist nation that goes to war ideologically and sometimes physically against other people. And we have to break those forms of idolatry, of being certain, of interpreting things through a fundamentalist lens, of the ideology of whiteness, and get back to this idea of full community, that we are deeply connected, that we are interwoven, as King talks about, that in one single garment of destiny, that we're all interconnected and we can't get away from that. And that's the only way that, to use Baldwin's language, that's the only way for salvation in America is for America to recognize the interconnectivity, that we are tied to each other. And what we say about people we claim we don't like or we think are takers says more about us than it says about them. And until we come to that realization, we will always have an anemic soul that maybe has full pockets, but is always destined to move into a space that will be destructive to the community ultimately.
Rinku, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I feel like I need to confess right now that I was raised Hindu and I was born into a Hindu family, but I'm a pretty bad Hindu. I think I might be a better Buddhist than I am a Hindu. So what I really
I'm not putting you in any particular.
It's all good. I think a lot of Hindus are in my position, possibly, and of course, Hinduism and Buddhism have a ton in common. So, what I really believe in, though, is energy and the unknown. And I think the imperative, the spiritual imperative of this time is to lead with love. And what I've learned over the last period about that, about leading with love in particular, is that love isn't a state of being. It's not a way you feel. It's a thing you do. It's a practice. You don't feel it unless you practice it. And I have a friend, Shwenka Rahim, who coined the phrase Bibo love. It's breathe in, breathe out love, B-I-B-O love. And that's a reminder that it's literally with every breath you take, you can either take in love or something else, and you can put out love or something else. And it takes some consciousness to breathe in and breathe out love all of the time. And I think for us in this country, the battle between love of self, the individual, and love of all, the community, is our essential conflict. You know, we want what we want as individuals, and often we have really kind of inadequate methods for navigating that, negotiating that with the collective good. So I would love to do lots of things every day that wouldn't be good for the environment, and wouldn't be good for my neighbors, and wouldn't be good for my housemate. And if I can navigate that stuff, if we can all navigate it with love, even for people who oppose our ideas or who we think have done the wrong thing, then we might have some chance at coming out of this with something better. There's a wonderful Roberto Bolaño quote where he says, nothing good comes of love. What comes of love is always better, is always something better. And I think living that and carrying it into our political work, it's certainly been the biggest challenge of my life, but I'm committed to it because it's really the only way I see a path forward.
You know, I'm thinking like, well, you know, I'm supposed to be the Buddhist, so I think I'm a bad Buddhist since, you know, interconnectivity, the interconnectedness of all things, Buddhist concept, you know, right relationship concept. And I'm going to just, you know, piggyback off of Rinku and say that, and jump into maybe not so much Buddhist. First of all, what I will add is interrogate, right? Like we actually have to, like that is a very core Buddhist idea, is like that you have to interrogate the whole of it. Like you have to look at the whole of it. And, you know, to Rinku's point, if you're looking like at only your own part and you're not looking at the collective, then you're not looking at the whole of yourself, because you are of the collective. So you have to interrogate everything and understand that interrelationship between the so-called individual and the whole, the collective, that we're always a part of that, and so it always affects us. I think we have to leverage love at scale, and I think we can leverage love at scale if we really help people to understand what love means in the way that Rinku is talking about, in the way that Otis speaks about. It's like we can actually leverage the idea of doing love at scale, and the shying away from it, you know, for all the ways in which, you know, political parties shy away from the concept of love, means that we leave our greatest asset, if you will, on the floor, on the table, unleveraged and unused. And simultaneously, we reduce ourselves to merely material beings. And we're not material beings, right? We're energetic beings. We're spiritual beings. And so when we don't bring love as a stream through our understanding, you know, then what we're doing is we're reducing ourselves to material value. The last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of conversation about, you know, doing the work. And I've really been thinking about this notion of doing the work and how it ends up putting us inside of the paradigm of productivity. And so many of us are exhausted. And this idea of like, oh, we're doing the work. And yet there is, you know, there is effort that has to be made. There's really like the gnarly places that we talked about. So I've really been thinking about, you know, the sense of labor and the difference of labor, and this toiling, labor's root word means toil, and it means, to John Lewis's, credit, it means trouble, right? It's the labor that is troubling, like that, and that we embrace that sense of the good trouble, of the toiling, of the effort that doesn't always actually show up the way that we expect that it will. But as Rinku paraphrased, and I want that quote from Rinku, that it will make it better. It is labor. When it is a labor of love, it will make it and all of us better.
Michelle Obama gave such an amazing speech the other night, and she said, we're going to have to look our children in the eye. And I want to add, we're going to have to imagine what our great-grandchildren, 7 generations hence, what are they going to say about us in this moment? That they did this or that to make a future possible for us. So what do we have to do today? There is so much at stake so that there will be a future, and what will future generations say about what we did in this moment?
We have to plant in this moment. We're not going to eat from the fruit that we plant. We're going to have to do the work now, and working for generations who have not yet been born. That is about building this idea of a democracy, this new America, giving all of the necessary concepts rooted in love, so that the children who are not yet born can say that a previous generation laid this out, and we are existing in that. In my tradition, in my home church, growing up with my father, we used to always hear those in the church talk about our ancestors, and they would say that there's a great cloud of witnesses, and they would name the people. They would say, as Maya Angelou said at my wife's graduation, she said, whenever you go into an interview or you ever do any project, know that you don't go alone. That in front of you is Harriet Tubman, beside you is Sojourner Truth, behind you is Fannie Lou Hamer, and next to you is your grandmother. So always know that you're going in with the power of other people who were planting. And that's a concept that we really have to put forth. It's not about the immediate concern. And that's the challenge of capitalism, is immediate return right now. How do we build a future? And I'm reminded of the story, and one of my favorite stories by Howard Thurman. When he was a child, he saw a man who was about 90 planting pecan trees, depending on what part of the country you're from, pecan or pecan. And he said, sir, why are you planting these trees? And you're too old. You'll never taste the fruit. And this 90-year-old man looks at this 11-year-old Howard Thurman and says, all my life, I've been eating from trees I did not plant. It's my job to plant for somebody else. And that is a spiritual idea that needs to run through everybody's heart and spirit, that what are we planting? What will take root? And will our grandchildren be able to taste it? And I'm a beneficiary of my ancestors, of what they did. My grandfather, we're working on our next film. I just have to give a shout out, which is a film about voting, about my grandfather was denied the right to vote multiple times. And the final time that he attempted to vote, again, now here's an interesting piece. He received a letter from the post office he wasn't supposed to get because he was a rural sharecropper in LaGrange, Georgia. And because the post office was not to work for people of African descent around voting. I just want to put that out there, that we're not doing anything new. And he was denied everywhere he went. Comes back home. He was a single father, sharecropper, raising 5 children by himself. And he said to my father and my aunts and my uncle, I didn't vote this year, but I will next year. He died before he had the opportunity to cast a ballot. And he died because of racism. He was in a car accident and they refused to take him to the very nearby white hospital. And so he died on his trip to a colored hospital. And so I heard the story over and over again. And my father was saying, remember, when you cast the ballot, your name is Otis Moss III. But every time you punch that ballot, the first time I went to vote, he said, you are checking it off for your grandfather. He worked so hard, but never had the opportunity. And so he planted, I'm eating the fruit. And now I'm passing that on to my daughter and to my son to make sure that they have that ethic in them and that idea that there's a great cloud of witnesses around you.
Rinku, if Otis is planting, what are we supposed to be doing for future generations here?
I mean, I think we're supposed to be saving humanity. Otis, your last segment just brought me to tears, so I'm collecting myself, thinking about your grandfather. You know, when I think 7 generations out, I think if that generation exists, they'll be saying something like, hey, there was a chance we might not have made it this far, humanity. And, but luckily our ancestors corrected their course and, you know, saved the environment so that we could breathe and be here. 7 generations is about what we're looking at as the crisis. I mean, we're at the crisis point on climate change now, but about 7-10 generations is where scientists think things, if we don't change course, things really fall apart. So if that 7th generation is going to be able to say anything, they'll be saying, thank goodness our ancestors took care of the air and the earth so that we could be here.
Well, thank you for that. No, I think that our generations will look back and hopefully they'll say that we got our priorities in order. That first of all, we were gracious. Then we showed up, and then we were fierce. And by that I mean, you know, that we have enough grace, you know, as the you know, Biden has done, is to, you know, to recognize like that we're going to like mix it up with each other. And sometimes it's, you know, hurtful. And then we get clear about our priorities and we have enough grace to say, but this is more important. And so for all of us that feel like our candidate wasn't chosen, it wasn't the person that we expected, it wasn't the platform is not exactly, that we have to have some graciousness with each other. And we have to show up. We have to show up and vote so that we can have the conversations that we want to be able to have, and not have those conversations always set in the form in which we're operating against what is happening. And that's all we're doing is scrambling backwards. And then we have to be fierce about getting the things that are important to us, you know, front and center, and continue to be in that kind of right relationship. And that sense of leveraging love that allows even people that maybe not seeing the way and seeing the value of, you know, the things that are particularly important to us, that if we're in right relationship, that what happens is it unfolds the opportunity. If we're fierce about being there and fierce about being there together, if it unfolds the opportunity for us to work it out. And as you know, both my colleagues, esteemed colleagues have said, and friends have said, it won't necessarily work out in the exact period of time that we're expecting it to, and so we need to be planting those seeds and be gracious and understanding that all of our fierceness is not for naught, that it is for those future generations to bear the fruit.
So planting, saving humanity, and fierce course correction, and leveraging love to scale. Did I get that right? Thank you all. That's very moving. I think there are going to be some questions from the audience, but while they may be coming to the fore, say a few words. I'm going to give you a few moments here to say words about what each of you is doing in your own context. That's bridging the prophetic word and doing justice. I know Otis, tell us about the South Side of Chicago a little bit. Rinku, the Women's March, and Angel, you've got something going on about this great radical race read and many other things. So jump in and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, the very important work in your context.
Well, I'll start. We're on the South Side doing the best.
To say, so, and I'm watching time. So
okay,
tell the preachers to do the sound bites now.
We're doing the best we can with what we have on the South Side. But we're building a community that known as Amani Village, where we have created a medical center. We'll soon have an urban farm, housing, and it's workforce development, where we hire people who are coming out of the mass incarceration system. And it's 27 acres. It will be a model for how we do development across the nation in traditional and communities that we normally don't want to invest in. So we're hoping that over the 15 years that we develop it, it'll be $115 million investment in an area that has never been invested in that to that scale.
Great. There's a lot more to say, I know, but that'll have to wait for another time, including some of these films. We want to see these films. Rinku, what about the Women's March? Tell us more.
So the Women's March has been in an exciting place and really building for the future through a series called Feminist Futures, which I'd really encourage everyone to check out. We are working with our community to put different ideas in front of ourselves, take them up, debate them, and really think about what a feminist world looks like in economics and culture and politics and all of the issues that we care so much about. So you can find the series on the Women's March website at womensmarch.com, and we'd love to have lots and lots more engagement in co-creating that feminist future.
Thank you. Angel?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, putting all of the things that I think are important in practice, right relationship and bridging love at scale, and also having people understand skin in the game. We're doing this great radical race read, which is basically folks are choosing from several books, and white folks, color folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, over 1,000 people together doing weekly what we call read-ins, in addition to reading their book in relationship and understanding how it is that we have to approach race and racialization in our own bodies and do that labor in our own bodies and do that labor in collective, because we say none of us learned racism or white supremacy or anti-Blackness alone, so we cannot learn it alone. So the Great Radical Race Read allows us to come together, and anybody that wants to support the technology and the massive effort that went into it is welcome to go to greatradicalraceread.com.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you all three. So I think we're going to have a question from the audience here. Says, greetings from LA, great program. Appreciate Angel's point about space and the new America. How can we envision that new America in our current context?
I think that the first step is what many of us have said, which is we have to come into real relationship with the fact that America is, that we speak about, America that we tell stories about never existed, and that so many of the systems that we have were not meant for those of us that are doing the very, very deep labor of trying to unseat them and shift them and turn them around. So I think that that's the most important thing. We're very, very quick to jump to what can we do about it? And I think that we have not done enough being with the complexity and the truth of wow, this was really designed for a very small number of people, and no wonder they are hopping mad that there are so many of us that it was not meant for, that are stepping up to the plate and choosing love as a path forward to bring those essential concepts into real truth with it themselves. So we're actually doing the labor right now, all of us in here, in this call, being in this conversation, of writing the relationship of America to itself just by showing up here. And so I think that that is the beginning. And all of the things that we have already spoken about here, being in right relationship, understanding that leading with love is the only way forward, and leveraging love at scale, because interpersonal, individual love, love that makes you feel good is absolutely not enough for what it is that is necessary to reconcile, to repair, and to redress the harm that has been done by the America that never was.
Either Rinku or Otis, you want to jump in on that question?
I'll just say really quickly that I think that there's so many people doing amazing things in new ways all over this country and all over the world. I think that we could spend a lot more of our time lifting up those examples. And, you know, they're not the ones that make it into the national news a ton. So there's a media responsibility and newness practice here of actually digging into solutions. People are creating them everywhere. I'm so interested in all of the mutual aid that we have done for each other since the beginning of March, which embody our sense of connection, and which could become the principles of that mutual aid could become the principles of larger systems, or replications or self-organizing. So I think that, you know, in addition to looking at big ideas, we also actually need to go smaller and figure out how people are building community across race, where they actually have to do it in their neighborhoods and workplaces and small towns and cities. So go local for the big visions is maybe what I'll say here.
I'm down with the go local. I love it. Yes, without a doubt. I think that's where you see the true beauty and the power of what people are doing. Whether it is we witness co-ops in Chicago of African-American farmers from Pembroke, which many of them escaped North Carolina in the 1800s, set up farmlands, and they've been completely boxed out, but they created a cooperative so that they could survive. These are fourth generation, fifth generation farmers. We have on the West Side, a beautiful story of an undocumented church community that has one of the best feeding programs in Chicago, 65,000 people that they feed. But here's the interesting thing. To deliver the food, they use gang members because you can't cross certain blocks. So they found a way to create community, and then they deploy people who are doing the immediate, what they call violence interrupter work, and they become trusted partners. I mean, this is beautiful work. You'll never see it on NBC, ABC. It will never be on Fox News, or any of those other things. But yet this is a great story. And these stories are the ones that we need to tell to allow us to imagine how we envision, so that we can deploy love as the fundamental ideal that we live by to plant trees for the next generation.
Who knows, maybe after this program, there's going to be this story on national news. Just who knows, Otis? Let's imagine that.
Let's imagine that.
Let's imagine that. We are coming to the end of our time, and I'm sorry that we haven't been able to take all of the questions. There's one really juicy one about engaging people in the electoral process who've given up on it. Can you say just briefly, and then I want to go to some words of closing.
I'll say really quickly that if people in a situation like that, your most persuasive messenger is going to be someone who had also given up on the electoral process and came back. Or even if if you're the messenger and you never give up on the electoral process, connecting with the times that you felt most cynical about it and least hopeful about it, coming at a person who has given up with some good cause, I suspect, with like, oh no, you're wrong, you should just trust the way that I do and participate. I don't think that's going to work or has worked. It works better if you can, if you approach the conversation with real empathy and from the place of connecting with what has caused them to become cynical, not start from that place where they are, rather than the place of like, you must vote where you might be, and more likely to have success that way, it seems to me.
Great.
And I would just add to that, for some, non-participation is privilege, and for others, cynicism is just protection from the fact that I have not been accepted. And I think that we also need to recognize there are some people who don't participate because they are completely marginalized, disenfranchised, and disinherited from the process at all. And then others can sit back and say, I'm not going to participate, and I choose to have a cynical attitude because I can. But guess what? The trash will be taken, the lights will be on, the streets will be fixed, and I never have to worry about the police busting into my house and shooting me when I'm asleep.
Thank you.
The perils of going behind these two is like all the best ideas are there. Absolutely. Whether it's people that have given up on the on voting, or whether it's people that have given up on understanding themselves as racialized people that may be in bodies that are getting material privileges but are not having their souls met. I think we have to listen. I think we have to begin with listening to people and really being willing to hear how it is that the systems or have not worked for them, or the way that they're understanding systems working for them and now being against them, working for them at some point and now being against them. I think we have to start with listening. And that I think we have to have the grace and the courage to say, I'd like you to give it another chance with me, and help and be willing to walk with folks.
Right. So we're coming to the close of our time together, and in my tradition, Christian tradition, at the end of a time of gathering together, we say, now the worship ends and the work begins. Now the prayer ends and the work begins. So what's a blessing or final word that each of you would like to offer to our fellow travelers at the Democratic National Convention today?
My final words come from the Church of Organizing. You can't win if you don't fight. So pull your love and your other resources together and get in the fray. Make the move.
Be brave, right?
So I would say that, love that is not for the sake of justice isn't love at all. And that we have to actually show up in that space and be willing to create, and to recognize, as Rinku said, the new America that already is actually here and emerging, and have the courage to actually recognize it and bring it into more being.
I would say live each day with the courage to love, with a compassion of heart, with an imagination of possibility, and keep planting for the next generation. And if you see any strange fruit, make sure you cut it down.
Great. Those are powerful words, and we're going to hold on to them. I want to let our listening audience know that there will be a recording of this panel that's going to be available on YouTube and on the Auburn Facebook page. So you can listen again or share it with your friends. Think about how you would like to answer the questions that I have posed to our panelists, because this is really all about us. And we all have to do it for each other and with each other. So take good care out there. Stay healthy. I want to thank my colleagues and friends here, Angel, Otis, and Rinku, and to my team at Auburn, and to all of you who are working on building the future together. Let's go out and do this. Take good care. Bye.